Welcome to Legal Lines. My name is Tom O'Shea, the host of this program, which is brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation. My guest for today's program is David Sunday. David is the Chief Deputy Prosecutor at the York County District Attorney's Office. And our topic tonight is going to be heroin abuse and the Heroin Task Force. First, I want to welcome you, David.
Thank you, Tom.
And on top of that, when we were preparing for the program, you told me that heroin abuse is an epidemic in York County. And quite frankly, I was very surprised by the word epidemic. So can you tell us what's happening and why you use that word?
Sure. To the best of my ability, Tom, I think a lot, unless it's touched their lives, a lot of people are surprised by that word. And the problem is now more than ever, more people have heroin abuse touching their lives. And I guess the most staggering number I can give you to sort of paint that picture, very simply is, right now it's 2014, we're basically a little over halfway through the year, and we already have more overdose deaths from heroin than the entire year of 2013. And that is, and the last I checked, I think we were around 19 heroin overdose deaths. That is a staggering number, and that is a very, very troubling indicator of the amount of heroin abuse that is going on in the county.
So that's in York County, that's over 3 deaths per month on the average that's going on from just heroin overdoses.
That's correct. That doesn't include non-heroin overdose deaths, because certainly people die from other drugs as well. That's just solely heroin overdose deaths. That's what that number focuses on.
And that's just, not just, but that's
sure.
the deaths that result in it. Of course, there are all kinds of other problems as a result of heroin abuse.
Absolutely.
And I didn't realize that it had become such a problem in more recent years. I mean, it's one of those drugs you've always heard that's out there, and the addicts sometimes use. But you also told me that this is something that across the county. It's not one given neighborhood. It's demographically.
And let me give you a little background, Tom. In my position in the DA's office, I oversee the County Drug Task Force and our felony drug prosecution unit in our office. Our felony drug prosecution unit didn't exist in the past. This is something that's been put together in the last 2 years, because there are so many felony drug cases that we wanted to dedicate prosecutors solely to prosecuting those types of cases. And with regard to heroin in particular, over the last, I'm going to say, about 2 years, there are a few things that we've noticed with regard to the heroin cases. We've noticed, first of all, that there are a lot more. If we, talking numbers in particular, doesn't really, it doesn't really paint the true picture of the problem. And the reason I say that is because, unfortunately, with regard to, I'll say, deaths in particular, we don't know about them until they happen. And so someone, unfortunately, has died before we find out that they even had a problem in a lot of cases. In addition to that, if we take heroin aside, or the overdose deaths aside, one of the things that the police officers have told us over the course of the last year or so is the price of heroin itself has gone down to levels lower than they've seen in 10 years. And that is very, very important, because just like any other market, and unfortunately the illegal drug trade is in fact a market, the prices of drugs fluctuates with supply and demand. Right now there is so much heroin flooding the market, and it's not just York County. This is a problem that we're seeing nationwide. We're seeing a tremendous amount on the East Coast, and we're seeing a tremendous amount in Pennsylvania. So we have the heroin prices that are extremely low right now. We have a tremendous amount of heroin on the market, and now we have a new demand for heroin, which appears to be coming from a lot of people who are in the throes of prescription drug abuse.
I think that's one of the things that you told me also while we were preparing, is that many heroin consumers, if you will, were started as regular patients for physicians who were using various types of painkillers,
Right.
prescription painkillers.
Yeah,
And how do they graduate from that to heroin?
well, there's an important distinction to make in, I'll say, there's an important distinction to make in, first of all, and I'd like to take a step back,
Okay.
in different types of drug dealers. And that's going to sort of be our gateway into answering that question. But the York County Drug Task Force and all the police officers of the county, including the York City Vice Narcotics Unit, and everyone that investigates drug crimes, comes into contact usually with two different types of drug dealers. And the first drug dealer sort of parlays into your question, and those are people who are drug addicts. And all they're doing is day to day doing what they can to get the money or to get drugs to support their habit, okay? And a lot of the people who become addicted to heroin through prescription pills follow that route. And we sort of have identified two different paths. The first path would be an individual who receives a prescription. Let's say they have an injury on the job and they have back pain. Their doctor prescribes them OxyContin. Months go on and they use their painkiller, and at some point along the way, the doctor cuts the painkiller off. And that person either has become addicted to the drug, or they may still have the pain. And they're in a difficult position because they have that pain and they don't have the drug anymore. And so what they're doing is, we are finding that people are going to, I'll say, the illegal market, and they're buying more pills. And the people that become addicted through that means, and let me tell you, Tom, no matter how they become addicted, it all leads to the same place. But once they become addicted through that means, they start buying pills, okay, from other people in the market. And then what they find are, and I've heard this story thousands of times, they find that the drugs that they become addicted to, the prescription drugs, are too expensive for them to buy on the market. And once those drugs are too expensive, because if you're a prescription pill addict, generally to support an addiction to prescription pills, it costs, I'll say the average addict, anywhere between $80 to $120 a day. Once people turn to heroin, well, one of the reasons they turn to heroin is because that same addiction, and to get high as much as a user needs to get high, with heroin only costs between $10 to $20 a day. And that's a big difference between $10 to $20 and $80 to $120. And a lot of the times, the reason why they make that jump to heroin is, first of all, they may be buying prescription drugs from someone who is just selling their prescription. And guess what? The prescription runs out pretty quick, and they have to wait until the beginning of the next month to refill it. And so in the interim, they're looking for something to bridge that gap, and they turn to heroin because heroin is an opiate-based drug, just like a lot of the painkillers are.
Like OxyContin is an opiate-based drug, is it not?
It is, absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure there are lots of scientific differences, but which I don't understand.
Right.
But nevertheless, it would give a user almost the same feeling.
Actually, Tom, I mean, one of the unique things with regard to some of the things some of the people we're talking to now and trying to really get to the bottom of this problem, talking to people in the community and especially talking to recovering addicts, I've actually been told, and I was just told this last week by someone, that the high that they got from OxyContin was the same as the high they got from taking powder heroin. And I personally was very surprised by that. I mean, that was something I didn't expect to hear that from them. But, I mean, we're learning new things every day. And, if I can just go back a second real quick, I described the path of the first person who has an injury. Well, there's another path, and this is this in itself is its own problem that everyone needs to be aware of. And as disturbing as this is, we're finding that more and more teenagers are engaging in what they call pill parties. And what they're doing is they're raiding mom and dad's prescription drug cabinet. And as is often the case, I mean, I personally had my teeth pulled I had a wisdom tooth out not too long ago. I got a bottle of painkiller. I put it in my medicine cabinet, and I never took it. And a lot of people do that. And kids know that. And as savvy as kids are, they've learned that they can get high from pills in mom and dad's pill cabinet. They can also sell mom and dad's pills for a decent amount of money, much more than a kid can earn working at McDonald's. And so through this adolescent behavior, teenagers are becoming addicted more and more to prescription pills, which ultimately leads, in a lot of cases, to heroin abuse, and which obviously has extremely devastating results on that person, on their family, on society. And so, I mean, this is a major, major problem.
So what you're saying basically is that it's two types of paths that people would take to get this. Patients who are on painkillers who eventually turn to heroin because the prescription ran out. They can't afford to buy the prescription painkillers that are no longer being paid by their insurance because they're no longer prescribed. They turn to heroin because it's cheaper and basically has the same effect.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And with the teenagers, they're basically finding them from their parents, relatives. They're able to buy them from, or if they're not using them, they're able to sell them to their friends at school.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And then that supply runs out, and those, because there's only so many pills that they're going to find in the medicine cabinet.
Right.
And now there's some dealer out there who's ready to sell them heroin.
Absolutely.
And sell it on the basis that this will give you the same feeling.
That you just summed it up perfectly. I mean, that's exactly right.
All right. So one of the things that you said that I thought was interesting is you said that there are two attorneys at the DA's office who are what you call felony drug prosecutors.
Right.
What's felony drug mean as opposed to just a regular drug prosecution?
Sure. Generally speaking, with regard to drug prosecutions, we have if someone possesses a drug, if someone holds a drug in their hand, that's a misdemeanor, generally. Felony drugs are cases where someone has been charged with a felony for either, I mean, generally speaking, the most of them are people that are delivering an illegal drug to someone
When you're
else.
saying delivering,
they're selling it. These
selling
are drug
drugs.
dealers.
These are drug dealers.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
So basically, as I understand it, these are people. You're prosecuting the dealers, the people selling it,
Right.
As the felony.
That's exactly
felony
right.
being more serious than the misdemeanor.
Absolutely.
And so the average consumer, if you will, would be a misdemeanor charge. Am I correct with that?
Well, the average consumer, if someone, generally speaking, yes, the average consumer would be a misdemeanor charge. But honestly, Tom, the problem is the average consumer in almost all cases jumps to a felony. And the reason is because the average consumer, once they get into the spiral of addiction, they lose their job, they don't have any money, and the only way they get money and pills is by selling drugs.
They become part of the suppliers.
Absolutely, hands down.
That's where it goes. Well, we talked about the problem in this segment, Dave. We're going to move to the next segment in a few minutes, and then we're going to talk about what's happening at the district attorney's office to deal with the problem. Okay, this is Legal Lines. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Legal Lines. My guest for today's program is David Sunday, the Chief Deputy Prosecutor for the York County District Attorney's Office. And we are talking about the problem of heroin abuse in York County. During the first segment of the show, we talked about how serious of a problem this is. And right now, we're going to be talking about what the District Attorney's Office is doing about it. So, I'll turn back to you, Dave. Like I said in the first part of the program, I was not aware that heroin addiction was as big of a problem as it is, especially here in York County, and that it's pretty much throughout the county. It's not a given neighborhood or a given segment of the population. And I want to ask you, what is the district attorney's office doing about this?
Well, Tom, that's an excellent question, and the reality is, traditionally, as prosecutors, what we do is we prosecute. And assistant district attorneys, in accordance with the law, generally speaking, we prosecute people that have been charged with a crime. And so first and foremost, we have ramped up our prosecutions of cases involving heroin deliveries and things of that nature. And when I say we've ramped it up, what I mean is we've expanded our county's drug task force. We've expanded it by number of officers and things of that nature. And the reason why we did that is because you just alluded to it in your question. It's very important to know, and if people take nothing else away from this show, they need to take away from this the fact that heroin addiction and prescription pill abuse is not something that is limited to the confines of, I'll say, York City. And I'm just using York City as an example. It is found everywhere in this county. And once we were able to look at the problem as a whole, we determined that there needed to be more work done across the entire county to chase drug dealers. I mean, quite simply, York City they have a vice and narcotics unit that actively goes after these people. And a lot of the dealers, becoming savvy, have moved to other parts of the county from where they base their operations. And so what we did, because police officers are confined by their jurisdiction, we have increased the York County Drug Task Force that's under the control of the District Attorney's Office, so that they can actually go across all the jurisdictions through the entire county and follow the drugs where they lead to the drug dealer. And so that's the first part of this. And when I say the first part, that's important because no matter who you talk to, everyone will agree that they may not agree on, I'll say, the causes of addiction. I think that people can debate that ad nauseum. But the reality is, one thing that most people do agree on is that there's a multifaceted approach to the problem, and it doesn't involve just prosecuting. It also involves treatment. And treatment is a extremely important part of this, because we in law enforcement, if we just do nothing but lock people up and put them in prison, that doesn't do anything to solve the problem for our community. Certainly, there are drug dealers who are extremely bad people who make tons of money dealing different types of drugs, and we go after them as aggressive as you possibly can. We do everything we can to find those people and to lock them up and put them in prison and to protect society. Now, in addition to that, there are a tremendous amount of people who become involved in the justice system who aren't big-time drug dealers, but they may be someone who, like we discussed in the previous segment, is an addict who is just day by day doing what they can to get drugs to use for their addiction. And so there's a treatment component of this. And there are different ways that that's done. Obviously through the York County Drug Treatment Court is one way. People that are on parole and probation, they are part of their probationary period has to be spent in a lot of cases getting treatment. But there's a third component to this, which is, I'll say, newer. And this is something that we have recently begun putting together. This is a new effort that we are adamantly going to attack, and that is communication. Okay, and that was sort of a long intro into, very simply, we're putting together what we call a heroin task force.
Okay, the heroin task force.
Yes.
That's something that was it's created by the district attorney's office?
Well, the district attorney's office, working hand in hand with the coroner's office, basically, in seeing all these heroin overdose deaths and seeing what's going on in our county, we sat back and we said, you know what? We have all these different individuals that are sort of attacking this problem separately, and so there are all these silos of activity. And what we noticed in the district attorney's office is that not many of them are communicating with each other. And just like drug dealers are multi-jurisdictional, we have to attack the problem in a multi-jurisdictional manner and across different spectrums of specialties. And what I mean by that is we put this task force together to bring people from all different professions that have something to contribute to this together in one room so we can talk about it and come up with what we hope to be. I mean, certainly it's not a panacea, but certainly we want to do what we can to attack the problem itself. And so we have we have the district attorney involved, myself, our county coroner. We have different police chiefs who are involved because it's vital that we have a law enforcement component in this. Another part to this, which is unique that hasn't been done, is we've brought in two medical doctors, and we brought in medical doctors that actually have experience and expertise in the areas of addiction. Both of these doctors have previously ran methadone clinics, and so I mean they're at the ground level in this problem. And so we have the mayor of York City, Mayor Bracey, she's involved, and we have different people. I mean, in addition to that, we have some legislators. We're bringing everybody together to come up with, what can we as a group from all these different walks of life do to attack this problem.
Okay, and one of the things that you mentioned is the drug treatment court. And
right.
I wanted to point out something that we discussed before the
right.
program, because we already did a couple of programs in the past few years on the drug treatment courts, which in your county are extremely successful.
Absolutely.
Okay, and they're doing a great job
Fantastic.
with those. And I think York is one of the leading counties in the state with respect to that, so we can toot our horn here in York County. But what you pointed out to me, which is very true, is the only people who get into the drug treatment
right.
court are people who get arrested for using drugs.
That's exactly right, Tom. I mean, that is...
and you want to stop that before they get to that point.
And you're absolutely right, Tom. I mean, the reality is if someone is using drug treatment court, then they've already been arrested and they're already in the criminal justice system.
And most likely they're arrested for something in addition to just the drugs.
Absolutely.
It's usually somebody who committed some crime because of the drugs.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly right. And so in viewing that, we need to become more proactive. And it's important that we look at the problem from as many different, I'll say through as many different lenses as possible. And in accordance with what you just said, drug treatment court, we view that as that's once someone's arrested. The goal is for people to not be arrested in the sense that we don't want people to become addicted. And so through the heroin task force, one of our goals is education. What we would like to do is put together programs, because statistics show that a lot of people use heroin, a lot of kids use heroin for the first time, believe it or not, in junior high school. And as horrible as that is, we do have that knowledge, and so we can actually go to the schools and we can explain to kids how horrible this is. And knowing junior high students, and at one point in time, Tom, you too were a junior high school student not too long ago. The reality,
you had to laugh at that, right?
The reality is, a lot of the students, I don't think they don't realize how bad it is when they first get involved with prescription pills, because to them it's something that a doctor gives you. It's something that a doctor has given their parents. It's something that ends up in their home, in their bathroom, and so to them, it doesn't seem like the dirty thing that a lot of people view heroin, if that makes sense. And so we want to bring into the schools people that have been through this, former addicts, recovering addicts, people that can explain to these kids, hey, this is what's going to happen to you. When the time comes for you, and this is our goal, when the time comes for that junior high school student to make that decision, that pinnacle moment in their life where it's, am I going to take this pill? Am I going to use this heroin? We want to give them the tools that they need to be able to make the right decision, which is clearly no, and to walk away. And so, we clearly can't solve all the problems of the world, but we believe that as a group, we will have a much greater effect on the problem itself, and we'll be better able to attack it with all these people involved who are stakeholders in the community.
So part of the program is going to the schools?
That's one of our specific goals, yes.
12 years old? I mean, junior high, what's that, 12, 13 years old?
Yeah, that's about right.
That's about right. Okay, and now, that's a big part of it.
That is a part of it.
As you keep pointing out throughout this program, that many times the heroin user started out as a prescription drug abuser.
Right.
Okay, and that's how they make the leap.
Yep.
Because the heroin is so much cheaper to get once you get used to the feeling of being high.
Absolutely.
On the prescription drugs.
Absolutely.
But in addition to going to the schools, what about the parents?
Well, the parents clearly are. I mean, there's a few things regarding the parents, and just from my experience as a prosecutor, one of the main ones is, and I'll just give you a prime example. Last week, I get a phone call from a parent, and they said to me, listen, I found something in my kid's sock drawer, and I think it's drug paraphernalia. What do I do? And of course, I told him, well, take it to the police station. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that all parents are armed with the information they need to understand potential symptoms that their children may show if they are using drugs. We want the parents to have the information they need to know where to get help, to figure out whether or not their kids might be using, and also to know to keep the prescription pills that they're not using out of the medicine cabinet and where to take them to get rid of them.
And when you're not using them anymore, get rid of them.
Absolutely.
Don't let them sit there for a year.
Absolutely. If they're not using them anymore, and if they don't need to use them in accordance with their prescription, they should call their local police department, because most of the police departments have.
Well, Dave, I want to stop you on that. We only have about a couple minutes left. But as a parent, wouldn't there be a concern about going to the police department because you're afraid your child will get in criminal trouble, which could prevent them from going to college or whatever?
Sure.
So is that the outcome if a parent goes to the police?
Well,
I can see a lot of parents reluctant to do it for that reason. I have a good child, made a bad decision, I'm not going to go to the police.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would say to that, Tom, is this. I have talked recently to parents of children who have died from heroin overdoses. And I had one parent in particular tell me that if they could go back in time and if they could go to the police, they would do it 1,000,000 times every day, over and over again, to save their child's life.
I can see that. And Dave, I hate to cut you off here, but we're running out of time. Today's program dealt with the, and I'll use the word Dave gave me, epidemic of heroin abuse and what the York County District Attorney's Office is doing about it. My guest was Dave Sunday from the York County District Attorney's Office. This is Legal Lines. Thank you.